Thank you. And so, as I mentioned to you when we talked yesterday, I very much identify with the crossing the chasm problem and the tornado opportunity due to my own experience way back in 2003 when we invented a new business process management application for sales incentives. And it was adopted by the number one player in the market at that time. It was a gift wrapped problem or answer to crossing the chasm, except it didn't solve all the problems. It solved the sales uptake problem, but it didn't solve the problem of managing your way through the complexity. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you in particular was, at some level, in listening to so many different technology adoption lifecycle discussions, people are very focused on how to make the jump. And from a marketing point of view, from taking advantage of the insights that you gave, for example, of recognizing that markets are self-referencing, right? And so as they're self-referencing, then what ends up happening is if you get to that moment, that precise moment in time, everything just accelerates. And that acceleration is a huge win. And it's at the same time, though, a huge problem. So, a good portion of your book, Crossing the Chasm, has to do with what the CEO has to do in order to orchestrate all the chaos that ensues. So I just wonder whether the typical executive reading the book underplays the amount of chaos and challenge involved in making the jump for the organization as much as getting across the market.
It can be a challenge. And it's interesting. There's kind of two kinds of challenges. One is, most people who do a startup have this dream of being a major new big thing. So they're really focused on a future tornado. Their mindset, and this is where getting the framework right is important. Their mindset is to understand, but you have to go through a transition where you become a local winner before you can become a global winner. And they're not oriented that way. They're thinking my product's going to be, everybody's going to use Steve Jobs. The Macintosh is the computer for the rest of us. And when he heard about desktop publishing, he said, well, I didn't invent a computer for graphics departments in enterprises. I want the rest of it. So getting that mindset of saying, we sometimes call it the primary mindset. If you're going to win the presidential nomination and you want to win the New Hampshire primary, votes in Vermont do not count. So in other words, you have to stay focused. That's one set of problems, which is just getting the focus. But your point is, let's suppose I do get the focus. Let's suppose I start to get this uptake. Well, now winning the New Hampshire primary isn't just about showing up in New Hampshire. You got to win the votes. And so that it's not just a marketing problem, because now you have to adjust what we call the whole product, which means you have to take your core product, but you have to make modifications to it that you would normally not make at this time. You'd say, well, I'll put that off for later. I've still got more basic work to do. But the segment you've attacked says, no. For us, this is the most important feature. So how do you reprioritize your product roadmap? That's going to create an engineering challenge for you. And then you go into sales and you say, well, I have salespeople, they've sold high tech everywhere else. They can sell high tech here. And the answer is, no. We're selling into the insurance industry, or we're selling into the distribution industry. If you don't understand about management development funds or marketing development funds, you're not going to be able to sell this product. So the salespeople have to adjust the thing. And of course, the salesperson says, well, a deal's a deal. And you're saying, no. The votes in Vermont don't count. You got to get a deal in our target segment. So all of these things require leadership and orchestration and patience, because people bring a different mindset at that point in the life cycle. It's very unusual for them to say, okay, I got to focus much more tightly than I ever have in my career before. But that's the game. And as the leader, you have to be able to enable that focus.
Yeah, one of the things we understood, and I think you do point this out in the book, is that jumping from vertical market to vertical market is no easy trick. So even in the sales incentive area, that happened to be my expertise, the fact of the matter is, the automotive industry does things different from the computer industry. And, you could pick any number of industries, and the lingo is different. The way they characterize their SKUs might be different. The whole approach can be very different. And so where does that have to then appear, it has to appear in the software. Once again, no mean trick, because the product management has to take on an entirely greater level of sophistication and abstractness in order to support that.
Yeah, it did, because until you're a big enough institution, until you're an Oracle or a Microsoft or something big, the market's not going to form around you. The market's going to reform around its problems. So you can go into an adjacent segment if their problem is similar to the prior segment's problem. But like, for example, you said automotive would use your software, but their problems aren't the same problems that the computer distribution people had. And so that means I have to have a new Salesforce that understands automotive problems. I have to have, by the way, I have to interface with systems in the automotive industry that nobody else has to interface to. There's a dealer, all these dealers, what the heck? And the dealers, by the way, are very different than the distributors in tech. So, I mean, you're right. You've got to be very thoughtful in your expansion policy when you're using vertical markets about where can I go and where can't I go at this time, because you're using vertical markets to accelerate your growth, because they have tough problems that if you solve them, they'll buy a lot of it soon. So that's great, but you got to solve that problem. And as you said, the problems can be gnarly and actually much more different from each other than you might expect.
Right. And then so at some point, when you're, again, just sticking with the product for just a minute, the cross product of the product itself and the marketing that or the markets that you're targeting, you at some point you're going to start doing some vertical hopping, I suppose. But your beachhead is very clearly in one vertical market, then possibly two, then possibly three, and at some point you flip and go horizontal.
Yeah, that's right, and that's the transition from what we call the bowling alley to the tornado. So when you're in the bowling alley, I think maybe the best way to think about it is when you win that first segment, you have two assets that you've never had before. You have a loyal customer base in that segment who says these guys are the real deal for this problem. And you have a tiny little ecosystem that says, we make money whenever you sell this product, you create business for us. So those are the two levers you have, and you can play either one for the second segment. You can say, I'm going to go to another problem inside the same vertical, and I'm going to say, maybe I solved a problem for the sales department. Maybe I'll try to solve one for the customer service department or for the marketing department inside the computer distribution, to use your example, right? Or you might say, look, we solved a sales incentive problem with this group of partners for high tech. Where else does this group of partners have a natural center of gravity, and maybe we should go there with them and take the solution that way? So those are kind of the two ways you look for leverage. But as you point out, eventually software wants to be horizontal. It wants to be abstract. It wants to be, bits do not know if they're working for lawyers or doctors. And so the big wins in high tech come when you do go horizontal. And then what you're doing now, you are product centric and eventually platform centric as you go forward.